reason they felt they needed to do that, Jesse, is because if they told their audience the truth, that when gas is the most expensive it's been, flights...
The recent clash involving Sonny Hostin, Charlie Kirk, and Megyn Kelly unfolded as a vivid display of ideological combat, exposing the fragility of carefully curated media narratives when confronted with unyielding facts. The episode began with Hostin's commentary on The View, where she took aim at a Turning Point USA summit attended by 5,000 young conservatives. Her remarks, laced with disdain, suggested the event was a breeding ground for extremism, a claim that Kirk and Kelly would later dismantle with precision. The underlying issue, as Kirk pointed out, was the media's reluctance to acknowledge the enthusiasm of young people traveling across the country to engage with conservative ideas, especially at a time when economic pressures like high gas prices and costly flights make such gatherings remarkable. Instead of grappling with this reality, Hostin and her platform opted for a smear, a tactic Kirk argued was meant to discredit the event and its attendees to avoid challenging the audience's preconceptions. Kirk's response was immediate and forceful. He didn't just defend the summit. He framed the attack as an assault on the students themselves, high school and college kids who, in his view, were unfairly targeted by a major media outlet. His suggestion to pursue legal action, referencing the substantial settlement in the Covington Catholic case, underscored his refusal to let the smear slide. Kirk's approach was raw, unfiltered, and grounded in a clear mission: to protect the reputation of the young attendees and expose the hypocrisy of those who vilify them. He didn't need to rely on theatrics. His argument was built on the tangible reality of the event and the broader pattern of selective outrage in media. Megyn Kelly, in contrast, brought a different kind of intensity. Her style was calm, methodical, and devastatingly precise. She didn't engage in shouting matches or emotional appeals. Instead, she laid out a case against Hostin's rhetoric with the clarity of a seasoned journalist, pointing out inconsistencies and double standards with surgical accuracy. Kelly's critique focused on Hostin's tendency to cherry-pick narratives, delivering impassioned monologues that collapse under scrutiny. For Kelly, Hostin's commentary wasn't just misguided, it was a performance, one that relied on emotional resonance rather than factual grounding. Together, Kirk's blunt force and Kelly's calculated dissection created a formidable challenge to Hostin's narrative, exposing it as a house of cards built on selective indignation. Hostin's approach on The View often leans on her persona as a moral arbiter, delivering pronouncements with a confidence that assumes her audience will nod along. Her comments about the Turning Point USA summit fit this pattern, painting the attendees as misguided at best, dangerous at worst. She doubled down with remarks about uneducated voters, particularly white women and Latino men who supported Donald Trump, framing their choices as a product of ignorance. This rhetoric, dripping with elitism, revealed a disconnect between Hostin's worldview and the realities of the working-class voters she dismissed. Kirk seized on this, arguing that her condescension toward those without college degrees betrayed a fundamental misunderstanding of their values and priorities. He emphasized that education doesn't equate to wisdom, and that working people, whom he called the muscular class, were increasingly aligning with Trump precisely because they felt dismissed by elites like Hostin. Kelly took this critique further, exposing the performative nature of Hostin's outrage. She pointed out the inconsistency in Hostin's moral posturing. Quick to condemn conservative rhetoric as dangerous, Hostin remains conspicuously silent when similar or worse behavior comes from her ideological allies. Kelly highlighted specific instances where Hostin's outrage flared predictably along partisan lines, ignoring inconvenient truths that didn't fit her narrative. This wasn't just a one-off mistake, Kelly argued, but a pattern of selective storytelling designed to maintain a particular image. Hostin's commentary, Kelly suggested, was less about truth-seeking and more about catering to an audience that expects emotional validation over factual rigor. The takedown reached its peak as Kirk and Kelly worked in tandem, each amplifying the other's strengths. Kirk brought the raw energy, laying out timelines, voting records, and public statements that contradicted Hostin's claims. He painted a picture of a media figure whose outrage was not only selective but strategically deployed for maximum impact. Kelly, meanwhile, provided the finesse, dissecting Hostin's arguments with a calm authority that left no room for rebuttal. She didn't need to raise her voice. Her evidence spoke louder than any tirade. Together, they exposed Hostin's brand as one built on theatrics rather than substance, a carefully crafted persona that crumbled when subjected to real scrutiny. What made this confrontation so compelling was its lack of reliance on a traditional debate format. There was no shared stage, no live back and forth, yet the impact was undeniable. Kirk and Kelly didn't need to confront Hostin directly to dismantle her arguments. Their analysis, delivered through separate platforms, hit harder than any televised shouting match could have. Kirk's focus on the students and the broader cultural implications of Hostin's smear gave the critique emotional weight, while Kelly's methodical breakdown of Hostin's inconsistencies provided the intellectual rigor. The result was a 1-2 punch that left Hostin's narrative in tatters, not because of insults or volume, but because of the relentless application of facts. Hostin's response, or lack thereof, only underscored the effectiveness of the critique. Her usual tactic of doubling down with more outrage or pivoting to a new talking point didn't work this time. The accusations of elitism and hypocrisy stuck because they were backed by evidence that was hard to dismiss. Kirk's reference to the Covington Catholic case wasn't just a legal threat. It was a reminder that media outlets can face consequences for reckless smears. Kelly's calm dismantling of Hostin's selective outrage exposed a deeper truth about the media ecosystem. Figures like Hostin thrive in environments where pushback is minimal, where emotional appeals trump factual accountability. When that bubble is pierced, the illusion collapses. The broader context of this clash reveals a larger cultural divide. Hostin's comments about the Turning Point USA Summit and uneducated voters reflect a growing disconnect between media elites and the audiences they claim to represent. Kirk and Kelly tapped into this, framing their critique not just as a personal takedown, but as a defense of a broader group: young conservatives, working-class voters, and others who feel dismissed by the mainstream media. Kirk's emphasis on the 5,000 students who attended the summit highlighted their agency and commitment, challenging the narrative that they were simply misguided or manipulated. Kelly's focus on Hostin's inconsistencies exposed the mechanics of that narrative, showing how it's constructed to maintain ideological control rather than engage with reality. This episode also underscores the power of alternative media platforms. Kirk, through his work with Turning Point USA, and Kelly, with her independent platform, represent a shift away from traditional gatekeepers like The View. Their ability to reach large audiences without relying on legacy media outlets allowed them to challenge Hostin's narrative directly, bypassing the filters that often protect figures like her from scrutiny. This dynamic, where independent voices can hold mainstream figures accountable, marks a significant evolution in how public discourse unfolds. It's no longer enough to have a loud platform. Credibility now hinges on the ability to withstand challenges from those armed with facts and a willingness to call out hypocrisy. The irony of Hostin's position is that her brand of outrage relies on the very privilege she critiques. As Kelly pointed out, Hostin's personal success, her education, her wealth, her platform, stands in stark contrast to her portrayal of herself as a defender of the marginalized. This contradiction became a focal point of the critique, with Kelly highlighting Hostin's lavish lifestyle and elite credentials under the disconnect. Kirk echoed this, framing Hostin's attacks on uneducated voters as a betrayal of the very people she claims to champion. The result was a narrative that flipped the script. Hostin, not the conservatives she criticized, emerged as the out-of-touch elite. In the end, the clash between Hostin, Kirk, and Kelly wasn't just a media skirmish. It was a case study in how narratives are built and dismantled. Hostin's approach, relying on emotional appeals and selective outrage, worked until it didn't. Kirk and Kelly, by contrast, showed that facts, when presented clearly and relentlessly, can cut through even the most polished performances. Their takedown wasn't about winning a shouting match. It was about exposing a deeper truth about the media's role in shaping perceptions. Hostin's narrative crumbled not because it was loud, but because it was hollow. And in a world where credibility is increasingly tied to substance over spectacle, that's a lesson that resonates far beyond one talk show segment.